Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 2 of Maple's Host a Pro, where we talk with top talents about everything from marketing to business and so much more. Our guest today is the co-founder of Thinkers One, a platform delivering personalized thought leadership from top global thinkers. Our guest today is the co-founder of Thinkers One, a platform delivering personalized thought leadership from top global thinkers. Recognized as a visionary and digital expert, he's an entrepreneur, investor, best-selling author, and trusted advisor. With nearly 3 decades in technology and media, he led a global marketing agency, operated in 25 countries with 3,000 employees before co-founding Thinkers One. A sought-after speaker, he tailored presentations for diverse audiences, delivering 40 to 60 keynotes annually worldwide. His books, 6 Pixels of Separation and Control-Alt-Delete, are business bestsellers. He's awarded Top 40 Under 40, invests in people, community, and technology. Mitch Joel, hi, how are you?
I'm great. Good to meet you. Nice to be here.
It's very nice to have you. All right, so we have not a lot of time, and I feel like covering everything that you do needs more than 1 hour of a YouTube show. I mean, the internet is not enough. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing today and what's your focus today.
Oh, today it's mostly primarily on my new startup called Thinkers One, which is a place for businesses to buy bite-sized and personalized video experiences from some of the best thought leaders in the world, so you can get them to either record a mini presentation for your meeting or your lunch and learn, or you could have them pop in live to your event. We've got over 100 thought leaders on the platform, people like Whitney Johnson and Rita McGrath and Dory Clark, and on and on and on. So it's a great way to make my peers who do professional speaking, consulting, journalists, academics more accessible to everyday meetings. I'm doing that today. I'm always working on the professional speaking side of my work, which I'll do 50 to 60 keynote presentations all over the world every single year. And then there's a little investment arm of what I do in terms of both advising and investing in startups, primarily in technology, of course. And then I'm obviously thinking about things like who's going to be the guest on my podcast this week, which conversations I have coming up, reading the books, getting prepared. So a lot of reading, research, and thinking is what's happening today.
That's great. Can we just kind of dive a little bit to Thinkers One, because I think it's such a great idea, and it's a refreshing take on today's influencers. It's a refreshing take on how to do something new with thought leaders and people who actually have influence from all sorts of places. How did you? So it feels like it's an innovative initiative, and I'm curious, how did you get to create that?
Yeah, I mean, we all went through this global pandemic and lockdown, and I think for a lot of consultants, professional speakers, authors, the world felt like it was doom and gloom. Like all these platforms that we use to get our information out has been shut down. We're all locked in. What I saw was a little bit different, being somebody who was both who had built a digital marketing agency and had lived in this digital world forever. I was watching a lot of my peers in the speaking world, get a ring light and a webcam and think that they reinvented the world, when other people had been YouTubing and being on TikTok for a long, long time. So for me, there was an interesting moment where both the audience and the thought leaders had to get very proficient at video communications. So there was that component of it where suddenly everybody had a nice setup and could record in near professional quality. The next component of it was I was able to just look a bit down the road, which is where we are now. And what does work look like? Work is hybrid, it's remote and in person. And if you look at a lot of the conversation around what makes for a successful workspace, it's interesting to me to see that the conversation is very much like, this is now what works in person. This is now what works in hybrid. And this is now what works in remote. And the idea that we had was actually something like Thinkers One works excellent across the spectrum. Now, why is that happening? It's happening because typically as a marketing person, we would talk, how do you surprise and delight your customers? And I really believe the challenge of business today is how do we surprise and delight our team members, especially when work has become so different, so fragmented, the employee having much more empowerment. And I don't think the answer is, hey, I love what you're doing. You guys are a great marketing team. Here, watch these 4 TED Talks on your own time. So what happened is this idea of, look, we have a place where a lot of these thought leaders can really give valuable content in about 15 minutes. They typically aren't accessible, meaning priced to come into your everyday meetings or lunch and learns. Is there a model here? And in a world of e-commerce being where it is, the answer was, of course. If we can make it very simple and easy for business to go on, choose the topic, choose the thought leader, write a little note to them saying what they want, and taking away all the admin that goes back and forth and having this happen, we could actually create a whole new tier of accessibility for these thought leaders, but more importantly, giving business leaders a chance to give their team a place to really grow, a place to have real value that isn't taking more time out of their day because you're running these meetings anyways. You're encouraging them to take part. It's a way to keep people connected. And that was the core idea. And so we launched it very recently. And it's been going really well. We're seeing a lot of very different use cases for it, which is really fun to see. And the truth is, it's really adding values to the business. And it's a way to surprise, imagine we were talking about marketing, and then at the end we can say, and here's Dory Clark or Rashanta Bakawala to share some insights. It's like, where did that come from? It's great.
Do you think, in general, okay, I have two follow-up questions.
Please.
One is this is a focus on employees in a workspace, doesn't matter if it's hybrid or on site. But it's actually a focus on talent, which kind of started like 2-3 years ago, maybe a bit before the pandemic, but definitely in the pandemic, talent was a major focus for HR and for corporate and for small businesses as well. Do you think this is a trend that will keep on going, and the focus will keep on being on bringing good employees and keeping them and nurturing them and bettering them? Or do you think it's going to stop at some point, because this is actually a part of nurturing your talent?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, especially as we're sitting on the precipice of not just AI, but the generative AI tools, right? Because whose work is it ultimately coming for? It's coming for the knowledge worker. It's coming for the creative class. It's coming for that environment. So you get your advanced degree and you get to middle management of an organization. And if your work is still traditionally quite repetitive day in and day out, that's the stuff that generative AI likes to eat very, very fast. So there's one aspect to it where that never ends. I think the other bigger answer to your question is, this is the question that is most on the minds of leaders. How do I get the best people on the team? How do I keep them? And how do I help them grow? And so again, I'm not banging a drum for Thinkers One, but if you think about your access to all of these different thinkers across all these different topics, it satiates all 3 of those challenges, right? One is, it's not just having a singer come on your Zoom and perform and you're like, or a magician where you're like, wow, that was fun. It was entertaining. Thanks for doing something. It's actually really adding value to a challenge that the business is having, and it's going to help the team member get better. 2 is, it's a way to connect your team members more. So who's less likely to leave? The person who's less likely to leave is either A, working on a great team, or feels like they're being coached and mentored by a great leader. So again, now, if that leader is bringing in divergent thinkers who've had best-selling books and who are writing for Harvard Business Review and who are on all these stages, sorry, that's a huge game changer. And then 3, which leaders look good? It's the leaders that are doing things that are special and unique to both their employees and their clients. So if I'm on a team and my leader's constantly introducing me to not just a book or an article or a concept, but bringing that person in, and it's personalized for us and our team, that's going to make me think this is somebody who really cares deeply about not just my advancement, which we talked about, but just me being here. So again, it's one of those weird things where when I think about the platform and being the marketing person that I was and the person that I am now, and I think so deeply about what work looks like, I'm always interested in, there's nothing that does this. And I'm like, well, in a very simplistic way, this can help. It's not the full answer, but it's a really holistic answer. If you have your HR or L&D team, looking at this and being able to acquire all this content, some of it recorded, some of it live. Just think about what the company looks like versus I have to call Mitch, I have to call you, I have to speak to your agent, I have to book this, I have to do all the, I have to have you add in, none of that, right? Company comes on, looks, chooses, customizes it, puts it on their card, and it shows up. So there's that thought of like, can this ever end? I don't think any business can say, we've done it. We don't need our people to be smarter, better, more engaged. And the trick is finding tools that are both cost effective and really adding value to both sides, making them better at the work that they do, smarter, and helping them, meaning the leaders, feel like they're connecting their people better together.
That's amazing. I don't know. I'm not sure who said that. Maybe Simon Sinek, but I'm not sure. That a good leader is the one who will nurture his talents to go outside and create something of their own. Because eventually you want people who are initiative and you want people who are passionate still, even after 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 years of working. And I think this is a really cool thing that you're doing and a great solution. I must say I've heard about it and it was mind blowing when I first heard about it, and it's mind blowing now.
I appreciate it. But it's true that if you think about like what that means is if a leader wants to do what Simon is saying, Simon says, fun game, you have to take them to this offsite. You have to book a half day, a full day. And this becomes the conversation that the leader has. We are investing in this person, but I'm also taking them off of the work. And what's the expense of that versus the output of that? So what typically happens is, unfortunately, it becomes a very limited activity. So then what are you relying on? You're relying on the individual. So my joke, because I didn't graduate college, university, was I never let school get in the way of my education. So I have friends who are MBAs and senior executives. And did you read this? Did you hear this? Did you listen to this podcast? The general thought is, wow, like you read more than any MBA would ever give you. And I agree that that's true, but that's a personal thing. What percentage of the population does this? Well, we can look at the top 25 best-selling books of the year and see that maybe one of them is even related to one of these issues that we face at work. So we know that it's a very small percentage. So the idea was that if you can fractionalize that, bring it into the 15-minute zone, and you as the leader can integrate it into their already busy day as part of what is already set in their time, that's a different dimension that we can unlock. Plus, again, if typically those thought leaders are only people we'd see at the annual industry convention because they're on the big stage, this is a bigger unlock because you're never sending your whole team to those events. Typically, you're going and you're already somewhat cynical or open to learning that information can't be distilled. So one of these use cases that I found super hilarious is typically I get off stage and you have what's called side stage leads. People come over and go, oh, Mitch, that was amazing. Like, how can I bring this to my company? And you tell them and they go, oh, we can't afford that. But now with Thinkers One, they can literally have me record a 15-minute summation of that type of content. And it can be in everyone's either inbox or highlighted in the meeting within 5 days almost, if not less sometimes. So I appreciate the comments, but it's challenging because it's a market making platform. I have to show people all these ideas for them to realize this is an easy way to integrate it. But that's where I think leaders can win. The win is not coaching somebody for an extra hour. The win is figuring out how to make that person a better performer in the time that they're already allocating to doing their best to make you profitable.
That's very correct. On the other side of that are the thought leaders and let's say influencers. I'm not afraid of that word. And those are people, as you said, they go to big annual conventions and they're keynote speakers and they're big names and they cost a lot of money. Most mid-sized and small-sized companies can't really afford them. And then you come and say, well, we're going to do something affordable. And, the first metaphor for me was Hollywood stars going on Netflix. Suddenly it's like this subscription kind of thing, and it's not the big screen, it's just the TV. Do you find like some kind of clashes? Do you find like some of them
No,
say it's not for me, or I'm really am
no.
asking because it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that the people who it's not for are the ones who are just happy doing what they do, whether it's consulting or speaking. My general sentiment to thought leaders is it's a gravy business. It can add double digit percentage wise to your revenue with no additional overhead or costs because you have the infrastructure to do it. And I think what you said earlier is very true. Now, suddenly, you can be accessible to small, medium sized businesses, nonprofits. You're also doing it in a way where it's not cannibalizing your stage. The stage is really different. There's a hotel booked, there's food, there's golfing, there's activities. They need a physical protein based being on that stage. That this isn't competitive with that. Yes, people can show up virtually and you can use it as maybe interstitials or a way to get more interesting conversations going. I think that that's a good add on. But again, it's a gravy to what they're trying as an event planner to do. Where I think this adds value is more like, wow, Mitch was really dynamic on stage. How do we keep him engaged? How do we continue this? Well, you could buy 2 or 3 think ideas and run them in your weekly meetings. So there, what I do think is it's additive, not at all taking away from it. And I think the challenge for maybe some of the thought leaders that are more in the speaking business is they might see it as competitive, but the world that I see it, and because I am in that world, I don't see it as competitive at all. I think that it's additive. In fact, I use it as a pre-sale. I'll often tell people where I'm speaking at your event in a month, I'll be like, hey, you're having me talk about this topic, but if you want me to expand on this, this, and this, you can buy these and run them after the event as a way to have continuity, as a way to keep engaging your guests and your attendees. So if anything, what I look for is not the relationship between movies and Netflix. I would say more that it would be from the movie star doing Cameo or something like that, where they're just engaging in a quicker, different way and helping to, the idea, Michael Bungay-Stania, who's a very famous thought leader, he's extremely successful in the coaching space. He said, every day my inbox is filled with an organization that's just looking for a little bit of magic in their lives. And that's really what I think Thinkers One can do. So if anything, to me, when thought of well, it's really complementing the actual products that a thought leader sells. And if I think about the day-to-day of a business leader and making my team smarter, again, it very much complements that versus you go to the event, you see 4 or 5 speakers, there's value in that, but how do you bring that home to your team? So a lot of the stuff we see is one-to-one. This is a one-to-many model where the leader really is buying it to disseminate the information to everybody. And clearly, if they're choosing the topic, it's based off of the values, it's based off of the position, it's based off of the challenges that the organization is facing. And as someone who owned a business, at the end, we had 3,000 employees in 30 plus countries. We were constantly looking like, how do we keep people connected to one another? How do we keep them engaged? And I think a tool like this would have been tremendously helpful at the time.
Was it challenging to spread the word? Like, you come from marketing, the business, how it works, what branding is. It feels like, I know who I am, and you are yourself a thought leader in a way, and you have a lot of things that you're doing and you've done. And it's still a challenge when you start a business like that. You still need to give the idea. I mean, I'm sold. I'm there. I'm taking everything that you're selling, but still, I mean, it's a very big world. How do you handle that? What was your go-to?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big weight on the shoulders that we have on this because in the early 2000s, when I started my digital agency with my business partners, I started blogging and podcasting at a time where very few people were, and we were able to really catch audiences that I think if I started now, it would be really challenging. Content is content. It's everywhere. So there's a couple of challenges that we face from the marketing and strategy side. One is market fit. Do we even know that this is something that even though you and I think it is, that the world agrees to? So we're dealing with things there like trying to find the market fit. What's the right pricing model for this? What's the right time length? How do you position it? What are the right topics? So that's ongoing. This is still very, very new. So one is just market fit. 2 is the reality, which I'm uncovering as I even discuss it more and more with people like you, that it's a market maker. It's not something like you wouldn't think, how do I buy bite-sized and personalized short form, right? So it's not something that you would typically would search for. So you have to find ways to engage for it in a way where you're market making. The other side of it is just a general marketing. So one side could be, look, it's unique because it is a marketplace. You have supply and demand. So my supply is my thought leadership, my demand are the people looking for it. Typically, when you're building a two-sided marketplace, you're dealing with multiple marketing challenges because you're marketing supply, you're marketing demand. I'm not saying I don't have that challenge, but it's a bit different because what's unique in this is that supply generates demand. Meaning in my inbox, in the conversation that we're going to have, I'll probably have 2 or 3 inquiries to my services that I won't be able to do because of either time, location, or fee. So instead of saying no, I can now say I can't do that. But what I can do is go here and buy some of these video experiences. So now we'll get into the tactical ways to market. I don't think in fact, I'd say we haven't even scratched the surface. We haven't even gone to the surface to really start with this. The first test was, does the technology do this? And the answer to that question is, it's just me and my partner, Aubrey, who helped me run our digital agency together. And the answer was, can a transaction happen without any human intervention? So being very new, the answer that we know now after several sales is, yes, that part works. So now we can expand. We have about 100 thought leaders on, but we've got so many more coming. And obviously bulk sales, doing a marketing packaging of 4 different thought leaders. There's a whole bunch of things we are and can do. So that's one side of it. Then you're talking about using the thought leader. A lot of these thought leaders have tremendous audiences. So how do we use them? Is it, hey, can you just talk about it? Is it, hey, you have a big newsletter. Why don't we advertise about you in your newsletter? Is it, hey, you just wrote a new book. Let us promote your new book while at the same time letting them know they can get some of the concepts on Thinkers One? Is it the fact that I've been running the longest business podcast in the world and I feature guests every week so I can do a little shout out at the beginning, which I do, or is it about taking clips of that and promote? So we're not in a place where we're sitting here going like, wow, how do we market this thing? I think we're in a place where there's so much to do and we are but 2 people. And yeah, we've engaged with agencies and people like that to help us because that's the model we're working with currently. But I actually look at it with a lot of excitement because any idea I give you as like a tactical thing we could do, everybody that we speak to is like, that's a great idea. So now it comes down to doing it and executing on it. And we're just at the beginning days of that. And, self-admitted, I've been very privileged and lucky to have the success I've had professionally. And we see this as a fun project. Seth Godin talked a lot about these projects, and I'm a big admirer of him. And this idea that, this might not work. It's a project. We're having fun with it. Could I have raised money for it? Yes, we were offered quite a bit in venture capital money. Even thought leaders who saw it were like, can I invest in this? And Aubrey and I are running it small and slow on purpose, which adds to it a lot of marketing challenges as well, because I could spend hours rattling off ideas here. We have to start doing them. And that's really where we're starting. What are we thinking? Definitely channel wise, we think LinkedIn. We're talking about things like TikTok. I'm a big lover of spending endless hours on TikTok. And I do believe that there's an audience for thought leadership content. I see some of it, but I think there's a bigger play that can be done there for sure. Look, there's just general comments. You have a lot of these thought leaders that are creating great content on their own, going and saying, hey, if you like this, don't forget you can find them over here. I mean, anything that's hot in the world, like comment marketing happens to be the big thing everyone's talking about. I think Thinkers One is really positioned to do it great.
This is kind of like this is kind of an adventure that you're taking and you're saying, I want to enjoy this. Like every little bite of it. It's like a dinner that you're having and you say, I want to taste every piece. It's like a gourmet, tiny little piece of mushroom and I want to know exactly what it tastes.
Yeah, the analogy I would give is just think about everything you've ever heard about business. It's usually 2 things. How did we start? How did we exit? That's what it is. And what I discovered in both building this digital marketing agency that we built for, close to 15 plus years, and again, built it from a little shop to a multi-office to being sold to a large public company and the number 1 player in the space, was I didn't respect the middle, the journey of it. That's where all of this stuff happened. And so the positioning is similar to what you're saying, but a little bit slanted to this idea of, we don't have an exit. The idea isn't like, what's the exit, like as it was in the agency. The idea wasn't, how did you get started in a time when nobody was doing digital marketing and websites and social media? It's really this moment of saying that we might be able to build something very big that goes well beyond this even as an idea. And we can do that very fast and scale and move, or we can just understand that the middle part actually is the important part. And so the less external pressures that we have, we don't have many because it's not that expensive to run every month, just if no one's buying it even. It puts us in a fortuitous and privileged space where we don't have to do everything or anything or pivot or any of those typical tech startup words that you hear, but we can really focus on the middle part. And I do think that the best business leaders aren't the ones that tell the stories of starting or exits. I believe that success is a complete anomaly. We've normalized it through all these case studies, but it's the anomaly. The people that are working hard in that middle part, those are where I think the great stories are.
I love this. I really like it. You're talking about you're only two people, and you're talking about execution and having, the right hands. And, Mayple is all about that, having the right marketing expert to help you with the specific needs that you have. Do you feel like sometimes it's the next level is going to be like getting a bigger scope, or do you feel like a part of that middle that you want to enjoy is that it's just the two of you just really taking the journey?
There's a social aspect to this, and I don't want to belittle that, which is relevant to this question, which is, it bothered me deeply that I would get these questions about what can I do? We are a small women's entrepreneurship circle in Columbus, Ohio. We are a small nonprofit trying to get parents to donate toys for a women's shelter. And I'm sitting there looking at these requests thinking, yeah, I give my time freely and I do a lot of contribution work, a lot of community work, but they're asking for bigger things. They have budget. And it's not that I'm trying to take it away or not give donations. Smaller business. We're 6 people and we're trying to just be better at understanding generative AI. And these are all things that I believe a lot of my peers, especially the ones on Thinkers One, could contribute tremendous value to. But because of how we're priced for our core products, we're just out of that marketplace. We're inaccessible. So listen to my podcast, follow me on X. There's a social part of this, of really trying to get valuable insights into different types of organizations. And by the way, there's a byproduct, which is that people then do book me for speaking or others for their consulting or whatever else they sell. They recommend us to their industry association for their annual event. So I don't want to diminish the fact that I think there's this social aspect where some of these people, I'll often hear people from large organizations will say to me, I've never heard of these thought leaders. And that makes me sad too. I think these people have incredible messages that should be spread much further and wider. It's why I come on podcasts like this and do a podcast of my own. So that's the other part of this moment in time where you want to make sure that what you're doing as an individual isn't just about the capitalistic nature of what it is, because I am that person. But I've been fortunate enough through the speaking business and my agency business and just the work I do in thought leadership to have built this incredible community of amazing people who know even more amazing people. And if I can help them spread their message and at the same time help other organizations get access to it, that's the spirit of what I would get to based off of that question.
What gets your creative juices going? How do you keep that source?
2 things, really: reading and writing. It's read, write web, read, write Mitch. I spend a lot of my time reading, predominantly books, a lot of them not even nonfiction anymore. I've turned to read a lot of fiction. I subscribe to a ton of newsletters and Substacks and news feeds. I am what I have self-described as an infovore. I'm just out there like consuming as much info as possible. But I think what has helped me be inspired is the content creation side of it. It used to be more on writing articles. Now I do a lot of media appearances and obviously the podcast, where I can take all of this information and then have a conversation with an expert about that exact issue or the author of that book. and now distill that to a greater audience. And then the sub value of that is if they're not on Thinkers One, I can introduce them to Thinkers One. If I get somebody who listens to that podcast and comments back and has questions, I could then refer. So that gets me really excited. What is it? I mean, again, we can go back to the Oracle, Seth Godin, who I'm very privileged to get to know him and have access to him as needed. But ideas worth spreading. That's the thing. Well, there are people with incredible ideas that can spread them to their audience, but how do you spread them beyond? And in a world where search is changing and there's so much content and we're so polarized, I think that what gets me going is this ability to have very real conversations about real serious issues while avoiding a lot of the political, religious, and nationalistic components of it, and just get into that without the noise of everything else. And I mean, that's the thing that pushes me forward every single day. How lucky am I? I get to wake up and speak to smart people like you. I win. Today's a win. If nothing else happened and I had this conversation with you, big win in my day.
I'm gonna blush.
That's part of what we do. We blush because you're putting in the work. I'm putting in the work. And we don't, I often think of my life, because I came from journalism, as I'm not the cover story. The cover story is the cover story. I'm just the byline of that cover story. But we've come to a world where the people who write the bylines are also recognized. And that's what it is. And I struggle with being very self-promotional, because I'd rather tell you about this piece of content and what's in it and the value it's going to bring to you if you consume it, versus look at how great I am and I'm hanging out with so-and-so. So when even you say influencers, you might have noticed my body language was, it's not about, I like the influencers who are really helping me be better. I really don't like the influencers that are doing this because they believe this is their profession and they believe that by showing off or inflating their own tires, that's going to get them revenue. It might, it's just not my type of content.
I think I had a really interesting talk about this with Ramon Ray, about how
he's awesome. He's on Thinkers One. Yeah.
He's amazing. Had a great interview with him. So we were talking about influencers and how it's just a matter of semantics, because thought leaders are influencers because they have influence and you want them to speak about something, and if you're related to that, that's great. And I think what you're talking about is the dark side of social media, kind of showing something like living your best life, kind of phrasing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hit and miss. I mean, you can be an influencer and you can say I'm an influencer and that's what I do for a living, and that's great. I'm an influencer partnerships manager. I know I talk to influencers a lot, and it's the people who have the influence and the creation juice, and the way that they present information to the world, and the information that you might then take from TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is. So I can understand your kind of.
Well, I think what's interesting about the industry is the semantics create brand. And I think influencer has done an non-great job of making it extremely valuable. It's almost like the influencer is a TV, and they're the channel by which we can filter messages so long as you pay them and it's done well. Influencer as a term, we can close our eyes and think of people showing off, or my car, or this is my space, or this is what I now do. Even it's interesting because when we talked about the early days of Thinkers One and we landed on the word, we're going to call them thinkers. We didn't want to call them thought leaders because that felt a bit too academic and presumptuous. We didn't want to call them gurus because, one is that could be cultural appropriation, but at the same time, what does that mean? We had all these words that were going around. We settled on a thinker because ultimately what do you want to do is you want people who can help me think differently. So I'm not saying it's the optimum word, but the branding connotations around those semantics in the world of knowledge is really tough. I mean, look, I remember, if you were a podcaster or a blogger, that was not as important as being a journalist. Now the joke is, if you're a journalist, you're not only not respected, but what does that mean? You have an iPhone? Like, does that make you a journalist? And then, so this is the complexity of the business that you are specifically in, which is not just attracting brands to work with these types of people, but helping them understand that, when I think of influencer now, I could think of the Bud Light controversy. And so you suddenly, all influencers are lumped into this. Is that really great for the brands? Do we have to do a full audit of every single post they ever made and see if they align with our values? Or someone might drudge up something they did. We've seen, famous comedians get canceled from Saturday Night Live because of things they've said in a podcast. I mean, this is a complex time. So you're right that they could just be semantics, but to the general public, they're becoming very polarized words that we have to be very thoughtful of, for sure.
I think it's kind of on us in terms of
Yes.
To educate or re-educate, because it's been democratized and it's been all over, and everyone is on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and even LinkedIn, starting to see more and more unfamiliar with like the suit and tie business type persona. And I think it's our job as the people who are working in that sphere,
I agree,
to kind of educate and lead this to be the right kind of context for the word.
And ultimately, when you're advertising, when you're advertising in a platform as a brand, you are part of their politics. And I think the volatility of the individual. What I mean by the volatility is, I love the content. I don't create a lot of video. I do a lot of audio and written, but I follow it, obviously, for obvious reasons. And when I see a lot of these influencers, YouTubers creating videos about why I'm slowing down, or they're also chasing a paradigm that is unreasonable, that every video has to perform at a certain level with a certain, their access to the analytics, I almost think can be paralyzing to creating the value. And it makes it hard then for the brand to commit to it, because they see the volatility in the data as well. Not everyone's going to be able to do, a deal with Mr. Beast. And so you're typically looking at people who are fighting, like they don't realize the amount of work it takes to create content. I do. I've been doing it for well over 20 years, if not 30 years. It's very hard to create value in a world where so many channels are operating. Right? Think about it. We have text, images, audio, video. Either one of those, somebody could be a massive influencer in. Then you have short form, you have long form. Anyone can be in that. Then you have live, and then you have people, like, just think about, I mean, I am a digital immigrant. In the early 80s is when I got my first computer. I had one of the first modems and connectivity and bulletin boards and all of that to actual internet connection until the first web browser. But for most people, this is just the world as it is. I remember how hard it was to get an idea out to the world. Now, when I wake up and I want to tell people that I just had so-and-so on my podcast, I get paralyzed because I'm on X. Do I do that on Facebook? I do it on all of them. Then I got to create a different one for, suddenly I'm in the business of promoting more than I am in terms of creating. These are the dynamics at play that are very, very complex for both brands to decide who to work with and for the creators. Because if a creator gives the scent that they're not in it, that they're not consistent, that they're not showing up, that they're, it's okay to show your personal side. It's fine to express your emotions. I think there's a value in that. But ultimately, I don't think the audience really cares. I think they just want quality content, which is why they showed up in the first place. And when you break that fourth wall, it can work for some people, but that's not sustainable content. The last thing a brand wants or an audience wants is to hear, all of the complaints and problems behind the scenes. Ultimately, they might want a bit of that, but they still want to see that stand-up comedian do their bits.
That's true. I think it's also a matter of you're talking about being paralyzed from the amount or where to or how to. This is also a branding issue for a lot of businesses, because they don't know where to begin and what to do, and how to succeed in that,
for sure,
kind of space.
And if they can sustain it.
Yeah, because
right?
I think that's the thing. I think that's the paralyzing thing. They don't know if once they start, they can keep it up. So yeah, you have ChatGPT and you can create like, create the next 365 posts for me on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever. But it's at the end of the day, it's not a real voice. It's not a real value. It doesn't really tracks the right maybe words even that you want to use. Um, and I think that's kind of the challenge for this year and for the upcoming years, how to kind of um, minimize the places where you decide you talk and you show up, and then you can decide you're showing up consistently. You go on and you do the work every day or every week or whatever you need. um, but I think that's a part of what's going to happen now. I had this chat 2 days ago in an interview, and we were talking about the next social media platform will be the one that will make people scroll less and do it
Yeah, maybe.
slower.
Well, I
Like
also think
people
on
will
on
want like the 30 minute stuff.
the yeah, like, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, because we can look at things like Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman, see 3 to 4 hour podcast episodes. We can see people binge watching entire seasons in one sitting. We see movies that are clocking in now at 2, 3, 4 hours. So I think everything is with, not instead of. So for every desire to have shorter, tighter content, there'll be a desire to have more in depth, more behind the scenes, more insights, spend more time, talk about it till it's exhausted, which is what what podcasting typically does. But what I do worry most about is the adoption of traditional media formats into new media. So we talk about the sustainability. What I mean there is, my joke with podcasts is somebody comes out and goes, "Oh, we have a 6 week season for our podcast." I have a 52 week season for my podcast every year, right? 52 episodes once a week, every week. I don't have best ofs. I don't have, that's the show. That's my commitment. How do I do it? Because I can't not stop doing it. I would do it for free. Basically, I am doing. I do it because it makes me better. And the trick is that I share it with the world. And if you said to me, what is the magic to creators? I don't know if it's the trends we're talking about so much as what is the thing that you would do if nobody was watching? And if you can't come up with it and a million ways to do it, you probably shouldn't do it. Because the seasonality of the business, I think, is very harmful. But it is true that that's what it was before. You would try out for a TV show. It was one season. Hopefully it would get picked up. It was a show that's once a week. We do 5, 6 episodes, 12 episodes a season, and then we have a break. It's you write a column and it's every month. It's you watch a show and it's 30 minutes. When you take all of those limitations away, because you're basically removing the monetization of it through traditional commercial and advertising models, it creates this problem. And it can be paralyzing, but I actually think it can be quite liberating. I don't believe, like, if you were me, you would see how unworried that is for me. If I don't record another podcast, I've got enough episodes to go almost till the end of next year, and a list of people that I would love to have on immediately, because that's what I'm doing. I don't ever wake up and go, what should I write about today? I look at the list of things that I'd like to write about and go, which one should I do? When you have creators like that, I believe that's the answer. And brands will respond to that. If brands see that, wow, this person has been consistent and has delivered and speaks in this voice to this audience, it's much easier for them to engage and try things. Much, much easier.
I really appreciate your time and your insights today. Is there anything that you want to say that we didn't discuss, or any last thing that you want to say?
If there was anything to say, I probably said it somewhere. So just feel free to search me out and
You're
look
great.
for something. It's there. Yeah.
You're great. Mitch, thank you so much. I had a real pleasure talking to you today, and hopefully we can do it again.
I would look forward to that. Yeah. You too. Thanks so much for having me.